Many people think or even dream of having their own island. Most of them dream of the warm waters of the Caribbean Sea or the South Pacific. Gananoque is a small town on the St. Lawrence River in the Canadian province of Ontario. It is located in an area called the Thousand Islands. Lots of people, both Canadians and Americans, live on these livable islands in the region. Not that some of these islands can't compare to those in the Caribbean or the South Pacific, because some of them have real, honest-to-goodness castles. For value for money, the Thousand Islands can rival any other island in the world. It's just that they are not in the tropics, but on the St. Lawrence River. The most popular story about the Thousand Islands has to do with the salad dressing of the same name. It is claimed that the dressing was developed by one of the housewives of the region. It later came to the owner of a famous New York hotel, who introduced it to the hotel menu around 1890. However, there is no written evidence of the veracity of this story. I used to drive a truck for a living. We delivered freight to 48 contiguous states and Canada. I worked for a medium-sized company that had about 100 trucks. All the drivers had a choice of long-haul, regional, or local hauling. Whenever one of us went on a long-haul trip for a week or longer, we had the choice of staying a week in the local region to spend time with family or going back on the long haul. We were also able to take our wives on the road with us on occasion. Most trucking companies across the country and in Canada leave their drivers on the road for weeks at a time. There are a few professions that are hard on families. The military is probably the hardest, followed by trucking and law enforcement. In high school, I worked part-time construction in the summer, so it made sense that I started working full-time after graduation. By the time I was 23, I was a pretty decent carpenter. When I was 19, I met an office clerk at a commercial bakery. Her name was Julie Simpson. My name is Scott. Scott Mann. Julie and I were married when we were 21. We were both happy until the banking system, followed by the construction industry, suffered serious losses. Julie and I conferred and decided I should try truck driving. They made decent money, and the biggest downside was that I had to spend time away from home. The company I worked for promised to pay for truck driving training if you worked for them for a year after you got your license. Julie and I discussed it and decided that we would accept. They accepted me and I started learning. 3 weeks later, I got my Class A CDL. The next week, they put me in a truck with a driving instructor. He was an experienced driver who took people like me on the road to teach us how to drive. It's one thing to drive a tractor pulling an empty trailer, but it's quite another when you hook a tractor to a loaded trailer and go from a 35,000-pound weight to an 80,000-pound weight. I was supposed to spend 5 weeks with the instructor, but he convinced the safety department that I was good enough to get my own truck in as little as 4 weeks. I drove it on the road for a week, then a week on local roads. It all worked out. I arranged for Julie to come to the office on Friday and pick up my paycheck. That worked out pretty well, too. We could have deposited the checks into direct deposit accounts, but Julie liked to receive them herself. I had been with the company for about 9 months and was just finishing up a week of local transportation. My dispatcher, Shirley, called me and offered me a pretty good deal. We had a load to Vancouver, Canada, and a return trip to Montreal. Only it wasn't really Montreal, it was Gananoque. The owner of the company had recently purchased one of the Thousand Islands. He was incredibly young for a cargo company owner. He was no more than 6 or 7 years older than me. Shirley told me that there were 2 houses on the island, the main house and a guest house. The owner and his wife wanted to furnish the main house with handmade furniture from Vancouver Island. The guest house was furnished. My job, if I wanted it, was to drive the load to Vancouver and then bring the owner's furniture back. It wasn't expected to be ready until a month later, but it was ready when I arrived, and the company's operations department decided to surprise the boss and deliver it early. Now here's the thing. You're not to tell anyone, not even your wife. I'm not saying she will say anything, but she comes to collect your paycheck and she might say something to the wrong person. The boss and his wife are coming next weekend. That should be about the time you arrive, if you make it to Vancouver, and they'll load you up so you can get back. Are you interested? Before I could answer, she interjected. Remember, if you agree or not, don't say anything to anyone. Promise? I agree, and I promise not to tell anyone. Good, good. Now, since you agreed and since I like you, have you seen that new Peterbilt standing in the yard? Of course I have. Well, it's yours. Put your gear in it. The load you take will be on trailer 2353. You can leave in the morning. Call me when you get to Vancouver and be careful. I got home and told Julie that it was time for me to head to the West Coast. She didn't mind because the money was good, but we both felt bad that I would be gone for almost 2 weeks. Right after I started driving the truck, we took some pictures of her, so I could take them with me in the truck. I traveled to Canada 4 times in my truck. Each time the truck was searched, and I mean searched. The only place that wasn't searched was the bag hanging on the seat the first time I crossed the border, and it had her pictures in it. After that, I left the pictures at home when I found out I was going to Canada. On other trips, they never went missing from the bag or other parts of my truck, including from under the mattress in the sleeper. On this trip, I left the pictures at home. The trip was easy. The border crossing was standard. The Canadian officials, as always, were polite but absolutely meticulous in their search. I called Shirley. She reported that the boss's furniture was ready for removal. They had brought it from the island earlier that day in preparation for my arrival. When I arrived at the customer's house, it only took an hour to unload me and another hour to get to the place where they would load me. Loading the trailer took much longer than an hour because they loaded each item individually and then packed and secured them. My truck was fully loaded when I headed east. I drove back to the States and headed east on Interstate 90. At Detroit, I headed back to Canada. It was about a 9-hour drive from Detroit to Montreal. I made it to Kingston, stopped for the night, and called Shirley. She said the boss was on the island and she already had a barge. I was to go to the commercial loading dock as soon as I could get there in the morning, and they would unload the trailer and take the furniture to the island. I was there at 6, and loading onto the barge took almost 10. The trip to the island took about 45 minutes. It was a straight shot, but the barge had to go slow. I went to the guest house to surprise the boss. The island was covered with trees. The only way to the lodge complex that I knew of was via a path. From what I understood, there was a small patio attached to the lodge. Not far from the guest house was the main house. It looked huge. On the terrace of the guest house, I saw the boss. There was a woman next to him, and I assumed it was his wife. When I got closer, I saw that it wasn't his wife. It was mine. I walked over to them and cleared my throat. They both jumped up and turned to me. It took them a second or two to realize they had been caught. He didn't recognize me as the man from the moon, but she did. I looked up at him. "They're bringing your new furniture in from the dock." Then to his wife, "Maybe you should get dressed before they come." I turned and headed back toward the dock. I didn't hear a word from either of them. I walked past the men who were bringing in the first piece of furniture. I reached the dock before I remembered that I was on a freaking island. Looking around, I saw 4 boats tied up. We had heard that there were several boats attached to the island, so I assumed they all belonged to it. I had never driven a boat, but that was about to change. I'd seen enough TV and movies to know that boats have a throttle. You push it and you go forward. You push it and the boat goes backwards. I also knew that boats don't have a brake pedal, but I'll figure that out later. I looked in the smallest boat, but there was no key in the ignition. There was a board hanging on the wall with boat-like keys with rubber balls attached so they wouldn't sink if they fell in the water. I grabbed all the keys and jumped into the boat. The key that popped up was the second one I tried. The others I threw into the river, with or without the rubber balls. The motor started immediately, but the boat was still tied up. I jumped out, untied the front and back boards, jumped back into the boat and pressed the gas pedal. The boat flipped onto its back and quickly pulled away from the dock. As soon as I pulled away from the dock, I hit the gas pedal and returned to my seat. The trip back to town took about 15 minutes. I approached the city dock too fast and damaged the boat when I hit the dock. The motor was still running when I jumped out. As I climbed into the truck, packed my stuff, climbed out and headed into town, there was a lot of attention on the boat. When I looked back, I saw that the boat was idling on the river with no one in it. The cab took me fairly quickly to the city of Kingston and its airport. The first plane was leaving in less than an hour and was flying to New York. I bought my ticket. My phone rang and I looked to see that it was Julie. She had left one message. "Call me, please." I called Shirley. "Good morning, Scott. Did you make it?" "How long, Shirley?" "How long what?" "How long has he been entertaining my wife?" "What are you talking about? My goodness, is she there?" She's there. She's fine. How long? About 3 months. I'm so sorry, Scott. His wife had to be there or I never would have sent you. So you'd send me somewhere knowing the boss was entertaining my wife. Who else knows, Shirley? Just the two of us, Joey and me. Thank you, Shirley. Thank you so much. Wait, where are you? What are you going to do? Wait, it's on the other line. I'll be right back. Screw you. Now I knew why she didn't want me to tell Julie about the trip. She would tell Bradley and there would be no surprise, especially not the kind of surprise he had just experienced. The airport was small, and I could see everything and everyone coming and going. I kept waiting for her or him to be about to show up, but they weren't. The flight didn't take long. We landed. I rented a car and drove home for 4 hours. She wasn't there. All the way home, I couldn't stop thinking about what I was going to do. My phone rang again and she left another message. Scott, if you're home, I'm on my way. Please don't do anything until I get there and we talk. We've never had sex, Scott. Please believe me. Jesus Christ. She couldn't think I was stupid enough to believe that, did she? At our apartment, I loaded everything I needed into my pickup truck, walked to the terminal, and calmly entered the operating room. Both Shirley and Joey were there. Seeing that it was me, neither of them looked at me. How much money do you owe me, Shirley? Scott, me. Write me a check for the full amount the company owes me, now. I'm sorry, Scott. Mr. Bradley asked me not to give you anything until he talks to you. Shirley, you owe me, a lot. He said you wrecked one of his boats. What else did he say? Did he brag about entertaining my wife behind my back? Did the four of you have a laugh at my expense? Did Julie come here and tell you to keep me on the road as long as possible so she could entertain Bradley? Write me a check, Shirley, and I won't destroy the whole damn office. It only took her a couple minutes to figure out how much I owed, and she called the disbursement office and told them to write me a check. I got out of the car and went to the disbursement office. They already had a check ready. I looked at it. I've changed my mind. Please transfer it to direct deposit. But Scott, direct deposit, now please. I gave them my routing numbers and they got it done. Bradley couldn't stop the direct deposit payment. Then I drove to Bradley's house. We were there for a picnic one day. My wife had probably been there for more than just picnics. Mrs. Bradley opened the door. She looked and acted as if she were sick. What can I do for you? She asked. My name is Scott Mann, and I used to drive your husband around. I was taking furniture to your island this morning and I saw your husband doing something to my wife. I thought you might be interested to know. Have a good day. Wait a minute, mister. What did you say your name was? Mann, Scott Mann. And what's your wife's name? Julie Mann. Did you see her this morning? With my own eyes. Are you sure? Good heavens, lady. Of course I'm sure. Do you really think I'd make up something like that about my own wife? I walked to my truck and, with no idea where I was going, headed toward my parents' house. It didn't take me long to bring them up to speed. Mom always had a coffee pot at the ready, and she offered me a cup. I took it. Soon I was already stretched out on the couch. I closed my eyes. The next thing I knew, I heard my dad's voice. Julie, get off my porch or I'll call the police. But I need to talk to Scott. After what you did to him, Dad asked. Absolutely not. But he doesn't understand. Oh, I think he understands all too well. You've been sleeping with his boss for 3 months. What's so hard about that? But he doesn't know why. Of course he does. You're a fickle bitch, that's why. Now get off my porch. She started screaming my name. Scott, talk to me, please. Scott, give me a chance to explain, Scott. Scott? It was a long day and soon I was asleep again. The next morning I woke up early and went to my truck. I had no idea where I was going, but I had to go somewhere. I opened the door to get in the truck and saw Julie sleeping in the seat. She got up when she heard the door open. I started to walk away, but she grabbed my arm and pulled me back. Please, Scott. Hear me out. I had no choice. Don't give me that crap. You're either having fun with someone or you're not. Scott, just give me a chance. I repeat. You're having fun with him willingly. Okay, yes, but besides, you lied. We've never had sex. Jesus, did you really expect me to believe that? Get out of my truck? She didn't budge, so I took her hand and pulled her with me. I was in and out before she could get her ass off the ground. I went to a fast food restaurant in town to get some breakfast. I ordered one of their breakfasts. I took the food to the table, sat down, and started eating. When I was done, I went to the bank and split our money. My phone rang repeatedly, and several people left messages. My former employer, Ernest T. Bradley, left too. Call me, and let's talk, or I'm going to sue you for wrecking my boat, and then you're going to jail for threatening my employees. And don't think I won't do it. That was his first message. Look, I entertained your wife. Get over it. It happens every day. She's not the first wife I've done this to, and she won't be the last. Swallow your pride. It's what she likes and wants, so give it to her. If you don't, maybe I'll keep doing it. Now get your ass back out there and bring my truck home, or I'll report you for stealing it. Besides, you'll have to drive for me for another 3 months to pay for truck driving school. That was his second message. God, what an asshole. So he was still in Canada. I called his wife to see if I could meet with her instead of rushing to his house like I had before. She agreed, and I listened to his messages for her. She had felt bad before, but after listening to him, she felt even worse. I wasn't sure I believed you at first, but I do now. I'm going to burn his ass. Can I get a copy of this message? We made her a copy. What are you going to do with your wife? She asked. Get a divorce, of course, only I don't know how to do it. That's easy, she said. Find a good lawyer and have him handle the case. It sounded so simple. I walked out of her house and back to my parents. They, too, asked me what I was going to do. I told them the same thing I had told Mrs. Bradley. My father, in turn, repeated word for word what she had told me. I was convinced and started looking for a lawyer. Again, I had no idea where to start, so I started with 5s in the phone book. I got to a 2 before I found my man. David Dennison and I hit it off right away. Everyone in his family was a trucker, including himself, until he flipped his car over and ended up paralyzed from the waist down. He finished law school in a wheelchair. He was the only member of his family not in the trucking business, but they all knew Ernest T. Bradley and respected him. Dennison repeatedly remarked on Bradley's youth and business acumen. In fact, everyone who knew him respected him. He held a huge place in the community. He sponsored sports teams, arts programs, and donated to all charitable causes. Dennison flatly refused to believe me when I first told him about what I had discovered in Canada. He was on Bradley's side, and I was ready to leave and find another lawyer, but decided to play the story out for him. Finally, he started to believe it. Wow, this is going to shake up the community if this gets out. How do you want to handle it? As discreetly as possible, or do you want to make a fuss? All I want is to get the divorce as cheaply as possible. As far as I understand it, it shouldn't get in the papers, but the reason for the divorce will be adultery. If that means it will be blown all over town, so be it. But there will be no mental cruelty or irreconcilable differences. She cheated, and it will be recorded. It can be tricky if that message is all you have. The courts almost require visual evidence these days, especially when it comes to a man of his caliber. Well, let's give it a try. Okay, we'll get her into court in the next few days. Do you have any idea where she'll be? Either at work in the bakery, or at home, or in Canada with him, I suppose. Well, in Canada, of course, we won't be able to serve her, so we'll try to serve her at home or at work. That works for me. You can reach me on my cell phone or at my parents' house. I was tired of living with my parents, so I spent the next few days looking for my own apartment. I found one that wasn't the swankiest or the best in town, but it was mine. A week later, Julie found a job. My father owned a small welding shop. I had never shown any interest in welding, but that was beginning to change. He talked me into going to work with him just to get me out of the apartment. Both he and my mother thought I was spending too much time cooped up. I thought about going to work for another trucking company, but had little enthusiasm for that or anything else, so I went to a welding shop. My dad had a pickup truck with portable welding equipment and mostly did repairs. Every once in a while, a customer would ask for something special, and my dad would do it. Julie tried to talk to me a few times, but after she was sued, everything went through our attorneys. Our first meeting was about a month after she received the subpoena. Her attorney, of course, tried to get the adultery charge dropped. I flatly refused. Bradley was named in the divorce petition, and Julie was desperate to keep his name out of the divorce case because of adultery. It could ruin his reputation in the community. He doesn't deserve that, she argued. I exploded. Are you serious? He's a wife-stealing scumbag, and the whole community needs to be told about him. Julie jumped up from her seat. If you had treated your wife better, she wouldn't have been stolen. An argument broke out between us that could only be ended by sending us to different rooms. When we cooled down and were back in the same room, she tried again to get me to delete his name. I'm not going to do that, so forget it. Why are you why are you trying so hard to protect him? Are you planning to marry him? Are you still having fun with him? For your information, he and I are still dating, so yes, I am still having fun with him. Her lawyer just put his head on the table, groaned, and without raising it said, "You just admitted in front of your husband and two court officers that you committed adultery. That's probably the worst thing you could have done." "At this point, I don't care," she said, then turned to me. "To answer your other question, I'll say that yes, I'm going to marry him, as soon as he's divorced." "So you think he loves you?" I asked. "Of course." I put my phone on the table and listened to his message. "He didn't mean it. He was just pissing you off." I laughed, watching Mr. Dennison pull an envelope out of his briefcase and hold it out across Julie's desk. Her lawyer intercepted it, opened it, and pulled out the contents. He read the enclosed note, then looked through the photographs one by one. He handed the package to Julie. She looked through the photos first, then read the note. "Mr. Mann, these may help you in your divorce. The first 5 were taken on the island 3 weeks ago. This woman is the wife of his hairdresser. She left her husband to spend the weekend with my husband. The next 6 pictures were taken at our house last week. I was out of town with my parents. This is the woman he picked up at the bar. I have no idea if she is married, and I don't care. I don't know her name, and I doubt my husband does either. She was just another piece of ass, just like your wife." The letter was signed Cynthia. All of the pictures showed Bradley and the 2 women. Julie put the pictures back on the table, got up, and left the room. I didn't see her again until the trial. We split everything up. She got half of our money, her jewelry, china, silverware, and clothes. She stayed to live in our apartment. Bradley's fall from grace was very swift in the community. His reputation was ruined, and the 3 sports teams he sponsored ceased to exist. Cynthia got half of all the assets they had, which meant she owned half of the trucking company and their house. The island in Canada only went to him because she didn't want it. He sent my lawyer a bill for truck driving school, accusing me of quitting without fulfilling the terms of our contract. Mr. Dennison immediately sent him a letter telling him to kiss our mutual asses. Cynthia called and told me to ignore the letter and asked if I wanted to go back to work as an operations manager for a trucking company. I was tempted, but turned her down. Over the next year or so, I discovered that if I put in the effort thanks to my father's patience and teaching abilities, I could carve some pretty good beads out of metal. I also realized that I enjoyed doing it. I've dated girls, but I've never had a long-term serious relationship. Once or twice I saw Julie, and we always acknowledged each other. Bradley's trucking business was sold, and I never saw Cynthia again. But I did see Bradley from time to time. I knew him, but I'm sure he wouldn't have recognized me as the man on the moon. When I worked for him, I was one of hundreds of drivers, and he only saw us occasionally. Learning to weld, I discovered that I liked working with metal. So, in addition to repairing in the shop and using the truck for on-site repairs, I started making small things like weather vanes, small hinges for gates, and posts for mailboxes. My father and I rarely worked on weekends, but one Sunday afternoon I found myself working on a rather ornate weather vane. I was having trouble with its proportions, and I stared at it hoping the solution would appear on its own. I didn't hear the door open or close, but I felt someone's presence and looked up. It was Julie. Neither of us said anything. She stood for a couple minutes, then pulled up a metal stool and sat down. "Can we talk?" she asked. "I don't have anything to say." "Okay, just listen." She leaned forward. "I have no good reason to do what I did. You and I had a good life. We had enough money, a nice apartment, we loved each other. At least I think we did. So why did I suddenly decide to sleep with Bradley? The answer is both simple and complicated at the same time. I could try to blame you and say that you were away too often because that was one of the phrases he fed me, and after a while, I believed it. He would also say that you treat me badly when you were home, and after a while, I believed that too. He said that almost every truck driver finds someone to have fun with on the road, and after a while, I mentally pictured you having fun with a waitress in a parking lot or a female truck driver. He also said that truck drivers never make enough money to treat their women normally, and after a while, I became convinced of that. He was, and probably still is, an ingenuous son of a bitch, and I was just as gullible as he was. It didn't happen overnight. He worked on me for months. Then Shirley started working on me, telling me how well Bradley could treat me if I let him. She told me that she could control your movements so I would never have to worry about you finding out. She also told me that Mrs. Bradley told her that she doesn't need entertainment as often as her husband, so she lets him sleep with different women because it makes him a better husband to her. She told me that Mrs. Bradley had to approve of the women he slept with and that she only approved of me because she saw me when I went to get your checks. That lie sounds silly now, but it wasn't true then. I know it now. I sat back and listened. When I thought she had calmed down, I spoke up. Why are you telling me all this now? I don't know. I don't think I wanted to tell you at all. Not the truth, anyway. I didn't want you to know what a fool I was. I always thought I'd make up a story to blame you for, and I've thought of some amusing incidents, but I've never been able to tell you any of them. This afternoon, as I was driving by your store, I saw you and stopped. I had no idea what I was going to say, only intending to say something, if you'll allow me. But what I said turned out to be true. And what did you expect? Only that you know you're not guilty of anything. It was all my own selfish desires and the made-up situations he created for me. I also wanted you to know that, believe it or not, I never stopped loving you. That's where I think you're lying. I don't think you can truly love someone and still lie to them or cheat on them. You've done both. You even wanted to marry him, if I remember correctly. Are you still having fun with him? I can't explain it any better than I already have, and I can't make you believe me, so I'm not even going to try. And no, I'm not dating him. Not since the day I saw those pictures in the lawyer's office. She sat for a few more minutes watching me work. I think I'd better leave. She stood up. Scott? I looked at her. Can you forgive me enough to give me another chance? I shook my head. It's over. You know your way out? I hadn't accomplished much since she'd left, except to reaffirm my opinion that my former boss was an asshole of the highest caliber and my ex-wife was dumber than a box of rocks. I wondered what would have happened if I hadn't gone to that island to surprise my boss. Would I still be driving a truck and getting sloppy seconds? I decided I'd be happier making weather vanes and going broke. One day in the mail, we received a flyer for the Renaissance Festival. I had never heard of the Renaissance Festival. It had pictures of people jousting and knights strutting around in armor. There were pictures of vendors selling armor, swords, knives, costumes, and everything else Renaissance-related. It was supposed to be right down the highway in Maryland, and I learned from this flyer that Maryland has two state sports, fencing and lacrosse. I didn't believe that fencing was an official sport in any state, so I checked out the information and made sure it was true. I decided to go. I spent the entire day there, most of the time looking at the vendors' wares and watching the participants. There was a lot of money rolling around on the festival grounds, and I realized I could get my share. There were several sword and knife makers and gunsmiths on the festival grounds. I liked the armor and shields. I went home and did a lot of research and designed my first shield and sword. I also searched the internet for a schedule of Renaissance festivals. I made 5 shields and 7 swords and took them to the nearest festival I could find. I learned that there are many, and they are held all over the country. I got there a day early to talk to some of the vendors. I met one vendor who was selling what I thought were the highest quality swords and knives. I offered him a deal. I would keep what I had and see if it sold, and he would get a commission. He hesitated but agreed. I was going to stay the night, but there were no rooms available near the festival, which spoke to its popularity, so I drove home. I rarely trusted strangers, but I didn't have a chance to sell it myself. The seller, Teddy Wyckoff, called me Sunday morning and informed me that all my stuff was gone. He would send me a check. I had new business, and I spent the next weeks making more and more festival items. Teddy demanded 10 swords and 10 shields for the next festival, which was to be held the following week. I managed to get 4 of each ready in time. In the meantime, I continued to help my father with his business. We got a call asking us to fix the driveway gate. Apparently, the daughter's beau had driven into the gate without waiting for it to open. I was told that alcohol was involved. I went outside and saw a huge gate on the circular driveway. The house behind the gate was huge. I met the owner, Mr. James Jameson. At first, I began to turn down the job because I thought it was too big for us. This gate was almost 10 feet high, but I decided to give it a try. All it would cost us was time and some metal if I messed something up. I spent most of the afternoon figuring out what tools I would need, and then went back to the store to see what we had that I could use. I found a couple tackers that I thought might work and headed back the next day. I worked for about 2 hours and had already made some progress when a woman about my age brought me an iced tea. Her name was Hannah and she lived here. It was her companion who had done the damage. I had my own food, but she came twice with iced tea and stayed to talk each time. It took 2 days of bending, twisting, straightening, and welding, but I fixed the gate. On the second day, Hannah came over with drinks and a sense of humor. I enjoyed her company. Around the same time, I became interested in armor. They were popular at festivals, and I wondered how to make them, how long it would take, how much it would cost to build, and finally, if it was possible to make money from them. I dated a woman I met at the library when I was doing research. We met at least twice a week and had fun every time we were together. However, this relationship, like others I had had, came to naught after a few weeks. There was a movie theater in the mall. I rarely went to the movies, but one Friday night I was so bored I went. No sooner had the lights dimmed than Hannah and her boyfriend walked into the auditorium. They sat down directly across from me, and his arm immediately went around her. Not 5 minutes after the lights went down and the previews of upcoming movies came on, I heard Hannah, "If you touch me again, I'll cut your balls off." His arm went around her shoulder. She walked away and her companion begged her to come back. I followed them. I had to hand it to her. She didn't take any shit from him. I wasn't close enough to hear, but they were arguing. I decided to intervene, something I'd never done before. "I'm really sorry, Hannah. Are you okay?" She looked at me. It took her a few seconds to recognize me. "No, I'm not okay. That asshole has more arms than an octopus and I'm tired of fighting him off. Would you mind taking me home?" "Not at all." We started walking to my car when another guy approached us. "Are you okay, Hannah?" he asked. "I am now." "Do you want me to drive you home?" he asked. She didn't even look at me before saying yes. They headed to his car without saying a word to me. "How are you?" As if I wasn't even there. I stood there and watched them walk away. I shook my head and went home. A few days later, I was at her house. The railing on the walkway between the house and the pool needed attention and Mr. Jameson asked me to come back. Hannah saw me and came over to say hello, but never once mentioned the incident at the movie. I was a little annoyed at being completely ignored at the movie and was in no mood to chat. She took the hint and left. The next day, I returned with the replacement parts. It was a simple, pre-made railing, so the spares were quite affordable. She was walking to the pool and stopped to chat. I paid almost no attention to her. I had enjoyed our conversations when I was working on the gate, but after the incident at the theater, not so much. "Are you mad at me?" she asked. "Do you remember last week at the theater?" I asked. "You mean when I was with the octopus?" "Yes." "And what was that?" "You asked me to bring you home. Do you remember that?" "Of course." "And then what happened?" "Nothing. Jimmy showed up and brought me home." "And you didn't see anything wrong with that?" "No, did you?" "Not if you didn't see anything, I guess." I picked up the hammer and started banging on the metal, just to make noise, thinking she'd go away. "It doesn't make sense." "I guess it does." She was growing impatient. "I don't see the point." I looked her straight in the eye. "That's the problem." I started hitting the metal again. She took the hint and walked away. It took the rest of the day to finish the railing. My interest in armor grew, and I studied a lot about how they were made. I created my first suit of armor and was very proud of it. I sent a picture to Teddy to see what he thought of it. "Stick to shields and swords," he said, laughing. "You're good in those. The armor needs some more work before anyone will buy it." A few days later, I was sitting at a local bar drinking beer and watching a baseball game when Hannah sat down next to me. "I'm meeting some friends for drinks. Would you like to join us?" she asked. "No thanks. I'm fine as it is." She got up and started to leave, but hesitated. She looked at me. "Are you ever going to tell me what I did to piss you off?" "If you have to, all the better. Enjoy your drinks." I had just finished my beer and was about to leave when she returned. "Oh my God, Scott. I didn't mean to ignore you in the theater. That octopus made me so mad I didn't realize what I was doing. Please accept my apology." I assumed she'd said something at the table about our conversation and someone had corrected her. Apology accepted. She smiled. Will you join us now? She paused. Please? Just a drink. I owe you at least that. I smiled back. I will, thanks. They all had a drink and the evening turned out to be fun. Two of them, I don't remember their names, reminded Hannah of her manners throughout the evening. I felt sorry for her. The band broke up and we all started to get ready to leave. I walked out with Ginny. I sat down next to her at the table. I asked her about Hannah and she told me that they had been friends for a long time. Look, Scott, I'm not her best friend, but I'm close to her. There's something about you that she likes. She regrets treating you the way she did, she told me. Hell, she told the whole table and she told you. You gotta give her credit, give her a call. Do you have her number? No. Give me your phone. I did, and she put Hannah's number in it. Call her. I was working at the store the morning of the next week when Hannah came in. I assumed she'd gotten the address from her dad. Did you have fun that night? Yeah, I like your friends. That's good, but what about me? What about you? Do you like me? I apologized, if you remember. I remember. Then why aren't we friends? She asked. I smiled. I think we're working on that. Apologizing doesn't automatically mean friendship. It just means you realize you made a mistake and you regret what you did, so you apologize. That person may or may not accept your apology. I accepted them, but that doesn't mean we become best friends. It just means I accept that you realize what you did and regret it. Provided the apology was sincere. It was sincere. I agree. Good. Then let's go to dinner. I laughed. Why not? She asked. It'll be a good way to work on developing our friendship. Okay, when? Why not tonight? And so it happened. Hannah and I had dinner and our friendship began to grow. After 2 months, our relationship blossomed and soon we wanted to spend all our time together. She would come to the store just to sit and be near me, and we both enjoyed that time. I could work and she could read. We didn't need to talk or interact, just being near each other was enough. One night during pillow talk, I found out that she had just recently gotten married. However, she shocked me by telling me that John Jameson was not her real father. She and her mother had only been married for 7 years. She had an older brother, and their father died. 2 years later, her mother married Jameson. Their father had a trucking company, and her brother, Ernest, wanted to take it over and run it. He was 6 years older than Hannah, and many people thought he was too young. But Hannah and her mother decided to give it a try. He showed great ability, and the company began to flourish. I got out of bed, got us both a drink, and went back to bed. Tell me about your brother, I said. I've pretty much told you everything, at least the most important stuff. The gist is that the shipping company was doing well, so well that he and my ex-sister-in-law bought an island in Canada. Then some bitch got her fangs into him and he ended up divorcing and selling the company. Apparently, this bitch's husband started working for him as a driver and decided they could make some extra money off my poor brother. The wife stepped in and seduced him. They arranged for the husband to catch the wife and my brother together on his island. The sister-in-law divorced my brother, took half the company, and then they were forced to sell it. What a pair of bloody thieves. I finished my drink in one gulp. How much did they extort from him? I asked. My brother wouldn't tell me, but they must have gotten something. Do you know their names? I did, but not anymore. I decided to tell her what really happened, but I realized that would be the end of our relationship, so I decided to rip the last piece off her ass. I set my glass aside and took hers and set it aside as well. After a while, we went to the bedroom and got down to business. As we settled down, I almost talked myself into not telling her who I was, but I knew that if I told her the truth, my ass would be toast. We were at her house, and I was going home anyway, so I got dressed. I sat on the edge of her bed, putting on my socks and shoes. It was time, and I started. Let's go back to the story of your brother's divorce. Was what you told me the official story or his version? He told me it was the official version. Why? Because it wasn't like that at all? What do you mean? So I told her the real story. About halfway through the story, she jumped out of bed and just stared at me. I ended by saying that the only thing Julie and I got out of it was a divorce, not extortion money. When I was done, all she said was, "You're lying, get out." I'm not lying, it's the truth. She threw a pillow at me. You're lying. Get out and don't come out. With those words, I headed for the exit. I hated that it had ended like this, and life went on. I had another social stagnation, and there was no way I could find a way out of the state I was in. One night, I felt like splurging, so I had dinner at a very nice restaurant. I finished my meal, put my napkin to my mouth, and looked around. A few tables away from me sat Hannah and her brother. On their table was a small cake with candles on it. I signaled to the waiter that I was ready to get my check. He brought it over and I paid. I stood up and walked over to Hannah's table and sat down. They both looked at me like I was an alien. Her brother spoke first. Are you sure you're sitting at the right table? He asked, clearly not remembering me. Yes, and I think you should tell your sister the truth about your divorce. She knows about it. Who the hell are you? But obviously she doesn't know the truth, so you should tell her the true version. Screw you! Scott, what are you doing? She was almost yelling. Get out of here! A waiter magically appeared. Is there a problem? He asked. This guy, Hannah said, pointing at me, came here uninvited and threatened my brother. I want him out of here. Of course. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. I looked first at Bradley. You're a real creep. Then I looked at Hannah. I don't know why you never talked to his ex-wife, but go to the courthouse and see my divorce record. Then you'll know the truth. Just get out of here, she said. I left, figuring this was the last time I'd see her. I was working in my workshop on the design of my latest hobby. I was almost too busy to see her anyway. There was a festival scheduled for the following weekend. I took some shields with me, as well as samples of my axes and chainmail to show Teddy. He gave me a vendor pass and I made my way to the entrance. When I pulled up, he was talking to a young woman dressed in period costume. I stood and waited while they talked. He looked in my direction, recognized me, and invited me to come over. Diana, this is Scott. Scott, Diana. He turned to her. Scott is the designer and constructor of some of our things, and I understand he may have some new products coming out. Is that true, Scott? I laughed. Yes. I pulled a few new items out of my truck. Both he and Diane looked at them like they were treasures. I couldn't take my eyes off her bodice. Every time she leaned forward, I leaned with her, hoping to see more, but it was too tight to let me get a better look. I spent a lot of time with them and even had dinner with them. Dinner consisted of meat pies and iced tea from another vendor. I wanted to ask about their relationship, but there didn't seem to be a good time for that. There were plenty of other people around, renewing friendships and contacts from other festivals. At least half the people were dressed in period costumes. Some men were acting out sword fights for their own amusement. These duels served as a rehearsal for the fights in front of the audience, which were to begin the next day. I don't remember seeing so many people having so much fun. Teddy pitched a tent set aside for vendors and reenactors, and I settled in for the night. When things settled down, I asked him about Diana. She and her sister are the organizers of this festival, as well as many others around the country. Everyone loves it when she comes. She and I have been friends for years. As a matter of fact, if you weren't here tonight, she'd be here. Oh shit, why didn't you say something? I would have gone to a motel. No, you wouldn't have gone. Even if I'd let you, there wouldn't be a spare room for 50 miles. When the guests started arriving the next day, the reenactors were even more fun to talk to, and Diane was a huge success as always, as I was told over and over again. I spent the entire weekend with Teddy. Several times I occupied his stall while he and Diane retired to their tent. I had plenty of time to socialize with the other vendors and visitors. We sold everything Teddy had in stock, plus what I had brought with me. It was a profitable weekend. I decided that I would travel to other festivals. The festival ended on Sunday. I helped Teddy dismantle his counter and pack up all his stuff. It was an 8-hour drive home, and he talked me into staying one more night. The next festival was 18 hours away. They could start setting up on Wednesday to open the festival on Thursday. I didn't think I would have enough time to do the chainmail, but I told him I would try. When I got home, I went straight to the workshop and got to work. It was getting late when I started yawning and realized I was tired. I had hardly slept at all over the weekend. The clock showed it was almost 2 in the morning when I left. By the time I got home, it was about 3. Not 5 minutes later, the doorbell rang. I opened the door and Hannah literally fell into my arms. She smelled like alcohol. There were two police officers standing behind her. Are you Scott Mann? Yes. Does she belong to you? I know her, but she doesn't belong to me. Are you sure? She insists you're her boyfriend. Not even close. The last time I saw her, she called me a liar and kicked me out of her house, so I promise I'm not her boyfriend. Which wasn't entirely true. The last time I'd seen her was at a restaurant, but that wouldn't change anything for them. Okay, come on, Tommy. Let's go pick her up. Tommy must have been his partner because he stepped forward and took one of her hands. Where are you taking her? I asked. To have her spend the night in the sobering up room. No, don't do that. I'll take care of her. Are you sure? No, but I can't have her spending the night in jail. I left her dressed and put her on the only bed I had. Mine. I slept on the couch, which was better than the air mattress in Teddy's tent, but I would have preferred my bed. Instead, there was a snoring drunk woman lying on it. I was about to fall asleep when I heard the sounds of someone's malaise. I jumped up and ran to my bedroom. It was too late to get into the trash can because it was strewn all over the floor. She looked at me, then felt the urge to throw the cookies away and did so. It took me about 2 seconds to decide what to do. I left the room and closed the door. I went to bed on my couch with a smile on my face. When I woke up the next morning, I opened my bedroom door and almost passed out from the smell. There was no way I could shower, shave, and dress in that horrible smelling room, so I went to work. I hadn't heard from her all day, and I fully expected her to still be asleep when I got home. I was wrong. She was gone, and everything was spotlessly clean. There wasn't even a residual odor of vomit. I headed straight for the shower. I looked for a note or something, but there was nothing. When I got into bed, I found that she had even changed her bedding. I only had one set, so she must have washed it, probably at the same time as the clothes. I worked tirelessly, but never got around to finishing the new chainmail. Teddy stopped by my place and picked up some shields, swords, and axes I had stashed away. We discussed whether to hire a couple of men to help, but both of us realized that there weren't enough metal workers. Then we discussed how to train a few and decided to do just that. We put ads in the regular newspaper and in the festival newsletter. It was Friday evening, and I was sitting in the workshop working on inventing a machine that would make chainmail faster than I had time to make it. There were several machines already on the market, but I thought I could do it better. It was getting late and I was tired when a knock sounded. It was a very sober Hannah. Thanks for saving me from jail. I stood up and nodded. I tried to clean up after myself. Was everything okay? I nodded again. She didn't know what to say as we both stood there looking at each other. Look, it's been a long day and I need to get some sleep. I pushed her out the door, closed and locked it, and headed to my car. Good night. I was about to get in my car when I heard it. You were right. My brother lied. I'm sorry. I just waved over my shoulder, got in the car, and drove home. The armor continued to fascinate me. After Teddy criticized the first suit I made, I did a lot of research and made another one that I used as a model for other suits. The work was labor-intensive, time-consuming, and very challenging, but I loved the activity. I felt I was ready to make my debut. I took it to the next festival, and Teddy loved it. We could have sold it a few more times, but we wanted to use it as a sample of my work. People would look at it, comment on it, and if they wanted to buy one for themselves, we discussed what changes they wanted to make to their order. My festival life was good and profitable. I bought a trailer and carried tools and supplies with me so that when I moved from festival to festival, I could work on my wares. Sometimes I worked at a booth in front of attendees, sometimes in the privacy of a vendor's corner. One evening between festivals, I was talking to my father and expressed my amazement that Renaissance metalwork could be such a success. Who would have thought that so many people were interested in armor and could afford it? These things didn't come cheap. The festival season was over and I started dating a girl I met at a local car dealership. I was thinking about buying a new truck. My dad's welding truck was old, so I figured we would put welding equipment on my truck, sell his old truck, and I could buy a newer and bigger one. She serviced her truck and I admired the new one standing outside the showroom. We struck up a conversation and ended up exchanging license plates. A week later we had our first date, then a second, and so on. One night I drove her home and she invited me over for a visit. We had a second drink and I sat on her couch. After a while she started hinting, after which she got up and took me to her bedroom. I left from my house around 3 in the morning. All the way home, I compared her to Hannah and to that last time we'd had fun with her and couldn't decide which one was better. That relationship lasted a good 4 months before we broke up. My phone reminded me that I'd been ignoring it all evening, and there were messages for me. 3 from Hannah. Scott, please call me when you get this. I don't care what time it is. Please. I took her at her word. She answered after 2 rings. Hi, Scott. Her voice was slightly tipsy. Did I wake you up? I think I dozed off. I was trying to stay awake waiting for your call. Okay, I did call. What's so important? I wanted you to know that my brother lied about his divorce. You were right, and I'm sorry. You've already apologized for that. Is there anything else? Yes. There was a pause. Can we see each other again? I miss you. Honestly, there's no way you and I can go out. Knowing who your brother is and that he had an affair with my wife? If we were in a serious relationship, we'd inevitably run into him and I'd always be uncomfortable. I'm not going to put myself through that kind of ordeal. I could see she was crying. I knew you were going to say that, but I was hoping you wouldn't. Goodbye, Scott. The Renaissance festivals were in full swing. I arranged for a vendor pass, bought a tent and camping gear, and hit the road. Most of the time, I helped Teddy at his booth. And when I wasn't helping, I was working on creating new items to sell. Over the off-season, my armor improved dramatically, and we sold at least one costume at every festival. We could have sold more, but each one took a hell of a lot of time to make. 2 days after one festival closed, Teddy called and asked if I could work his booth at the next one. I told him yes. He was close to the festival site, so he brought his trailer with everything he needed. I loaded up my truck and left the trailer at home. I took his trailer. I worked 3 festivals in a row and even made some signs while visitors watched. I was also able to work on my chainmail machine, and by the 3rd festival, I was demonstrating it. The next festival I was going to go to was near Philadelphia and lasted 11 days. It was one of the largest in the country. They usually run Thursday through Sunday, but this one started on Thursday, went on all weekend, the following week, and the following weekend. I spent 2 weeks at home working on materials for it, mostly armor. My father had become an expert on shields, axes, and swords. I worked late every night. Late one night, my doorbell rang. I opened it, and a very drunk Hannah fell into my arms. Does she belong to you? One of the 2 policemen who were with her asked. If it'll keep her out of the sober house tonight, I guess so. I half carried, half dragged her into my bedroom and just dumped her on the bed. I showered, shaved, put on my pajamas, and took clothes for the next day, just in case she had a recurrence and got sick. The next morning, I looked in on a still sleeping Hannah. I was trying to decide whether to stay and try to talk to her or leave it at that. I headed off to work. That night when I got home, the house was once again in perfect order. She had even cleaned up the kitchen. In the bathroom, the toothbrush and toothpaste were not where they usually were, so I put them where they were supposed to be. The toothbrush was damp, as was the tissue on the sink. I pulled an enchilada dinner out of the freezer and put it in the microwave. I ate the dinner but never tasted it. The next morning, I left for the festival in Philadelphia. I took with me all the materials I had for making shields and chainmail. I planned to do a lot of demonstrations. The first day went great, and it only got better from there. The first Sunday, I had a crowd watching me almost all day. Teddy and I were both exhausted when the festival closed for the day. In the evening, the vendor area always had a festival atmosphere. Food was being prepared, music was playing, alcohol was being drunk, sword fights were being rehearsed, costumes were being repaired or tried on, and horses were being groomed. I sat outside my tent when things settled down and thought about how nice it would be if I had someone to snuggle up with in my tent. Hannah was probably free, but there was no way I could bring myself to call her. The crowds were almost non-existent on Monday, but the foot traffic was constant. No attendance records could be broken on this day. It was the middle of the day, and I was demonstrating how tedious it was to collect chainmail. I looked up and saw Hannah watching me. I continued the demonstration and asked for questions from those who were watching me. There were none, and people just walked away. Hannah stood next to me. "Do you like doing this?" she asked. "Yes, I like it," I replied. "You're good at it." She stepped back and disappeared into the crowd. I didn't see her again for the rest of the show. My parents arrived on Wednesday and brought more shields and axes. I showed them around and they didn't seem to be thrilled with what I was doing. I showed them where the vendors were set up and my mom especially didn't like my tent. The rest of the week and weekend went very well. Both Teddy and I were pleased. Back home, I took the weekend off. When I got to the store, Dad was just working on chainmail for me. I started telling him about my plans to buy a motorhome and a bigger trailer. The door opened and Hannah walked in. "It's been fun at the festival. My friends and I are going to go to the next one, which won't be far from here," she said. "We were even thinking of going in costumes." "Should be fun," I said nonchalantly. "Will you be there?" "Probably." Dad and I kept working and didn't look at her. "Can I come with you?" "Not too practical, because I'll be there Wednesday through Sunday." "That's okay. We can get a motel room." "Not likely. They're sold out months in advance." "Where will you sleep?" "In a tent." "That sounds like fun. Maybe we could share." "It's a small tent." "Small can be fun." Dad looked at me, grinned, and walked out. "Listen," she said, "you're never going to let yourself forget that my brother slept with your wife, which means you and I will never have a long-term relationship." She looked back to see where my father was. "But that doesn't mean we can't be buddies with benefits, right? So why not use each other? You can date whoever you want, but if you don't get lucky, I will. How's that sound?" I looked at her. "You're the best I've ever had. I've said it before and I'll say it again, but the thought of living together leaves me cold. I can't stand the thought of doing it with you only to have you leave for another man even if you don't do it with him. We both need to find our relationship and honor it." She stepped close to me, reached out, touched my face, and kissed me. "You don't understand. I'm in a relationship. If you want to date someone, anyone, go ahead. But know that I'll always be ready for whatever you want whenever you want it. I don't need or want anyone else. I love you, and I fully intend to honor that relationship." She kissed me again and left. My father must have watched as she left. "What are you going to do with her?" I was still staring at the door she had just walked through. "I have no idea, Dad. What do you suggest?" "Either accept the fact that her brother slept with your ex-wife and accept the possibility that she's not going anywhere, or get out of town and stay out. Now is the time to do what your mom and I talked about." "Which is what?" "We'll talk about it when we get home." We sat at the dinner table while he told my mom about Hannah. I thought it was time to give Scott the gift we talked about. "I guess you're right," she said. "What were you two talking about?" "I don't like the idea of you sleeping in a tent," Mom said. "That's why we're going to get you a motorhome," my dad said. I knew arguing wouldn't stop them, plus I thought it was a good idea. It took a week to find the one I wanted. I didn't need driving lessons since I had a Class A CDL, so I just hugged them both, thanked them, and bought a trailer to pull it behind me. I set up the trailer so that I could work in it when needed. I also ran electricity from the van to the trailer. It turned out to be a great machine. I concentrated on the armor while my father worked on the shields, swords, and axes. We both really enjoyed doing this kind of work. When Teddy saw my machine, he got jealous and asked if it had been christened yet. "What do you mean?" I asked. "Well, has anyone had fun in it yet?" "No," he grinned. "Do you mind if Diana and I laughed. "Help yourself." He texted her and she was there in 10 minutes. He took her hand and they left. When they came back, they were holding hands and laughing. "We want you to be the first to know," he said. "Diana and I are getting married." She hugged me. "It was your RV that put him in his place," she said. "Thanks." I hardly saw them that weekend, but my RV smelled like perfume. And something else. I'd been home for a week, and Hannah saw the van and came over to my place. I showed her around and she was impressed. "It's much bigger than a tent," she said. "Yes, it is," I replied. "There's a double bed in here, isn't there?" she asked. "Yes. And a big closet." "Of course it's big. Looks like the shower room can fit 2 people." "I think so." We were in the living room of the van and she approached me. "Has he been christened yet?" "What do you mean?" I asked, even though I knew what she meant. "Well, has anyone entertained in it yet?" I lied. "No, it's brand new." "Well," she almost whispered, "we can do it now or we can do it this weekend." We were in the front yard of my parents' house, so the now she was referring to was impossible. What do you mean this weekend? I asked. We'll have plenty of time after the festival closes tonight. We can do it then. I'm sorry, but that's in Southern Virginia. Even if I agreed, it's too long a trip for you. You're right, she said. So I'll just go with you. Didn't you hear what I just said? She started tugging at my shirt, pulling me to her. Scott, you admitted that I'm the best piece of ass you've ever had, and you're the best I've ever had. Besides, I'm in love with you, and I know you like me more than a little. I'm leaving here on Tuesday at 5 in the morning. I won't wait for you, I replied meekly. You won't have to. She was right. By midnight Monday, she'd unpacked her things, gathered her kitchen supplies, and gone to bed in the van. Right after I got behind the wheel Tuesday morning, she arrived and sat in the passenger seat. She met up with Diane. At the end of the day, Teddy and I closed the pavilion. Diane and Hannah were in the van making dinner when we arrived. I had never eaten anything Hannah cooked, but it was very good. After Teddy and Diane left, Hannah offered to take her over, and who would I be to refuse? Never. At first, her family tried to convince her that the only reason I let her come with me was to get even with her brother, since he had convinced them that Julie and I were to blame for his divorce, not him. Apparently, none of them had been to court to see the truth, and they, like Hannah, believed him. Hannah provided them with copies of my divorce petition and her former sister-in-law's petition. He stayed in town and was responsible for several more divorces before deciding that moving to the other side of the country would be better for his health. He made that decision after being hit in the ass with buckshot from a shotgun wielded by an enraged husband. Thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed. Subscribe to my channel and watch for the next video.